And we're talking to one of the bond specialists. Her picks have soared since November, the last time she was on this program. We're talking to Nancy Koh of BCP Securities, and she rejoins us from Singapore. Now, Nancy, before we went to commercial break, you were talking about your interest and really these picks in the Chinese property space. Your top picks really, such as China Overseas Land, Shermao, and Agile. What about the risk facing these certain companies? Like, for instance, leverage is huge. I mean, debt to equity, you could some say, some at triple digits, 100%, 200%. Is this a point of concern for you?
I think, Susan, for us, in terms of the PRC real estate developers, we kind of focus in terms of the tier 1 players, and that would actually include like China Overseas, Agile, Shermao, Country Garden, and Evergrande, even though we think that Evergrande is slightly weaker, but it's comparable with Country Garden. I think where we come across in terms of assessing PRC, I think one has to look in terms of the projects, the location, the finishing, the management quality, etc. But I think more importantly, because I think in the last 12 months or so, I think very much thanks to the government stimulus packages, most of these tier 1 players have actually done well in terms of their pre-sales contracts, etc. And they have done quite well in terms of cleaning up their balance sheet structure. I think naturally, yes, it's concerned that with the year of government tightening of the policies, etc., it will have some impact. But our view is that it's not going to have such a material impact on the tier 1 players, perhaps more so pronounced among the third-tier players like SRE, the Shanghai Zhentai, and the China Properties.
Okay, well, you mentioned that Agile is your top pick, even though it is a bit pricey. But even for these, tier 1 names, as you mentioned, yields have fallen by almost 1 percentage point in recent weeks, especially for Agile. Half a point, you could call it, for Shermao. What exactly is the outlook for yields for these specific names, these top tier 1s in your eyes?
I think in terms of the tier 1 property companies, Susan, I think in terms of where their yields are, we think that's going to be a slight softening, but not going to be very huge, I think. But we are more concerned with regards to the tier 3 players like SRE and the China Properties, etc. But I think in terms of the yield, for tier 1, just take for example Evergrande. It made its debut on Friday in the secondary market trading. It kind of opened up slightly below par, and I think this morning opened up slightly stronger. I think overall, while we see that there's going to be impact from the Chinese stimuli withdrawal packages and the tightening policies, but I think overall, I think for a tier 1 players, we think that's it's worth a look in terms of the investments.
Okay, so give me what are the yields right now for Agile, Shermao, and Evergrande, these specific bonds?
I think for Evergrande right now, it's yielding around like 13 plus. We think that we see value in terms of the price level and comparable credit fundamentals with Country Garden. We actually suggested a switch out of Country Garden and buy into Evergrande because of where the pricing level is and comparable credit fundamentals. I think Agile is one where, even though it's expensive, but for investors who's looking more for a lower, better kind of risk buffer, because I think that's one of the better Chinese property names in that sector.
Okay, quickly, Nancy, we're running out of time here. You mentioned Indonesia, and your Indonesian picks are usually in the power space, such as Indica Energy, also Sekarang, Lestrando. Let me just ask you, how attractive are these two corporate bonds for you right now?
I think in terms of the natural resources, like for example, Susan, I think in terms of, let's say, Adaro and Indica, relative to their credit fundamentals and where the pricing level is, they may look a little bit kind of expensive, but we still see that there's value in terms of the Indonesian power and utilities play. Take, for example, I think Tinkara, was like 5.5 times oversubscribed. It's one of the very rare IPP story coming up in Indonesia. I think overall, given where the situation is right now, investors are wise to pick in terms of sectors as defensive, sectors that will use stable cash flows like the power play sector.
Okay, Nancy, a good Monday to you. Thank you for stopping by. That's Nancy Koh, BCP Securities.